The Ship of Doom by M.A. Bennett, Chapter 13, 14th April 1912 at 11:30 a.m. Konstantin made his way to the boat deck, the upper deck where the lifeboats were held. Here he knew he found some other people in uniform. He took a deep breath and his clockwork heart quickened. He was at last experiencing his brothers had felt during their adventures at sea and on the battlefield. They had told him their stories, eyes shining, as they sat, still uniformed and booted at the foot of his sickbed, just back from this campaign or that. They were brimful of tales of heroism and bravery, and he drank in every detail as thirstily as he drank his medicine, and it probably did him more good. Konstantin had had to make do with the tin soldiers they'd probably brought him. Their coats, crudely painted Prussian blue, and they would march them over the terrain of his bedspread, from Knee Mountain down Shin Ridge to Foot Valley. Konstantin had longed for so many years to be a hero, like his brothers, on a passenger voyage such as this. He was only sorry that there would be a little opportunity for him to be one. Konstantin found himself on E deck, by a corridor that was so long it actually had its own street sign saying Scotland Road. Scotland Road was actually a long iron corridor painted white with handrails all the way along. He hung around for a bit, trying to blend in, until eventually an officer opened a door off the corridor and entered the room, and Konstantin followed. He found himself in a pleasant, airy lounge with couches and desks and lamps. There were several portholes to the outside that were firmly shut against the cold, so the place had a cozy feel. Konstantin glanced around the room. This must be some sort of place of recreation for officers. One man sat at a desk, writing case open in front of him, scribbling a letter, perhaps to a loved one. Another man in a corner chair plucked out a tune of a banjo. A third sat at a desk with an album of stamps, sticking in an addition to his collection. The room had a very Sunday feeling. Things were calm and even a little dull, and not at all the action and industry that Konstantin had expected to find. Stamp collections and banjos. What would his brother say? Luckily, Konstantin also had something to do. He got out the book he always carried with him, not the same book all the time, of course, just the one he was reading at that moment. Since books had been Konstantin's only friend for his entire childhood, when he finally got out of the bed, he found he couldn't entirely leave them behind. So he drew his latest out of his pocket now and began to read. Naturally, he couldn't concentrate at all, even though the book he was reading, The Wreck of the Titan, was a rather good one about a huge ship that hit an iceberg and sank. He read a whole chapter before realizing he hadn't taken in a word and had to begin again, because in fact, he wasn't really reading at all, but thinking about how he could begin a conversation with one of the officers. In the end, he didn't have to worry. "Done," said the young man, with a stamped album. As he thumped the last stamp into place with the side of his fist and sat back, "I say, do you want to see?" Konstantin closed his book and tucked it into his inside breast pocket. "May I?" "Of course. I'm jolly proud of my collection. There aren't any other philatelists on board, so you'll have to do." But he said it in a friendly way. "Any other what?" asked Konstantin. "Philatelists. Stamp collectors." "Good job, because I've got a few rare stamps here and no mistake. I'd have to have eyes in the back of my head. Make sure no one swipe them." The young officer had only one pair of dark eyes in the front of his head where they belonged, a shock of dark curly hair and an open, pleasant face. Konstantin leaned over him as invited and looked at the album with the stamps stuck in the regimented rows. their perforated edges neatly trimmed. There were all colors and types, and some with pictures, such as the flowers of fernlands, some featuring those strange disembodied heads you often see on stamps. Among them, Konstantin recognized the familiar profile of Queen Victoria. The young officer saw him looking. That's a penny black from 1840. Quite rare. Should be worth a pretty penny one day, if you'll pardon the pun. And this one, he pointed to a red version of the same stamp. That's a penny red from 1841. They changed the color to red because you couldn't see the black franking stamp against the black. And this, he tapped his finger on a green-colored stamp with a man's head on it. This is my pride and joy. That's a downy head green halfpenny from 1911. The date left Konstantin reeling. It was pretty odd to be shown a stamp from a date that hadn't happened yet. And who is that gentleman? He asked. The young officer tore his eyes away from his prized collection and goggled at Konstantin. Are you the village idiot? That's the King of England, His Majesty King George V. But I thought, stammered Konstantin, Victoria. That was his granny. Queen Victoria died in 1901. God rest her soul. That was a shock. It was ridiculous to mourn for Her Majesty. They had never met. But it was still a jolt to hear that her long and illustrious reign was over. The monarch who had founded the very prize that the Butterfly Club were hoping to win, the Gabriel Medal for Communication, was now laid low in the grave. The old queen was succeeded by her son Edward VII. The officer went on. Then he died, and his son George came to the throne in 1910. Where have you been? Well, Prussia mostly, said Konstantin with perfect truth. Ah, that's where the accent's from. The young officer studied him properly for the first time. I haven't seen you before. Konstantin shrugged. Big ship, isn't it? I'll say, said the young man, seemingly satisfied. Biggest I've ever served on. Is Prussia where you saw your service? I beg your pardon? Said Konstantin. Your officer's stripe. You've got one on your arm, which makes you a fifth officer like me. You've seen a lot of action for one so young. Yes, said Konstantin, cursing the uniform he'd chosen to steal. Then he had a moment of inspiration. His brother's military record could become his. I served in the Prussian army. Impressive, said the young man. What's your name? Konstantin. Konstantin was caught off guard and couldn't think of a lie quickly enough. Konstantin Katz. That sounds like a mouthful of broken glass. I'll just call you Stan. If that's all right. Perfectly. Konstantin quite liked his new name. Mine's a bit easier. I'm Harold. Harold Lowy. The two shook hands, which was what gentlemen did. I say, said Harold Louis, I'm starving. Let's go and strap on the old nosebag. I beg your pardon? Get some scran, some grub lunch.